Hey guys, it's Yuta. So today I'm going to talk about some of you guys' favorite research material, hentai. Hentai is originally a Japanese word that means something like pervert. But at some point, English speakers started using the word for pornographic anime or manga, which is different from what hentai actually means in Japanese. That's why most Japanese people don't know what the word means in English. Check out this clip where I asked Japanese people what they think it means in English.
パーバンツじゃないですか？
違いますね。津波も英語になってるんですよ。
ああ、そうですね。
そういう感じで変態も実は英語になってて、エロ漫画、エロアニメのこと。あ、そうなんですか。
ああ、そういうことか。
聞いたことありますか？
いや、もう全然ないです、全然。
あるジャンルを示してるんですけど。
ジャンル
エロアニメとかエロ漫画とか。
ああ、深夜アニメでやってるよ。トラブルとかってやつですか？もっとえげつない。
そうだから本当に同人誌とかわかる。
あ、はい。もう本当に18禁なんですね。
超18禁です。
のジャンルのことを。
そう。変態。エロアニメのこと。
あ、そうなんですか。
AV やるじゃないですか。はい。AV をやってることをもうアニメのキャラでやるのが変態。
あー、なるほど。あ、そういうことですか。
同人みたいな漫画に。
あー、そうわかりやすい。
なるほど。イケてる野郎。イカしてるやつ。
ジャンル
AV とかですか？
そうですね、近いいい線。AV でもちょっとあるジャンルなんです。エロアニメ、エロ漫画。
あ、同人誌
とか、あとなんかアニメとかでその AV でやってることをそのままアニメでやってるみたいな知ってます？
あ、二人エッチとか AV のエロアニメのジャンルが変態って言うんですか？
そうです。
Did you notice that I had trouble explaining what hentai means in English to Japanese people? That's because in Japanese, we don't have a super established term like hentai for pornographic manga and anime. We just use descriptive terms such as ero manga or ecchina manga, which mean erotic manga, as in ero manga sensei. And for anime, we also say ero anime or ecchina anime, meaning erotic anime. And we also have doujinshi, which is basically fan fiction manga, which is often hentai. And maybe you can also say doujin anime, which is fan fiction hentai anime. And maybe there are other terms, but these are basically what I can think of right now. I'm teaching you these things strictly for educational purposes, obviously. But the next question is, what does the word hentai really means in Japanese? There are actually several definitions, but the most common one is pervert. You can use it for somebody who has perverted sexual interests, like... Actually, let's not talk about that in detail, but you know what I mean. If you know the anime Konosuba, there's a character called Darkness. She's known as a masochist, and in this scene, she gets excited by the idea of being humiliated in public. And you can hear they're using the word do hentai. Do is something like super, so it means super pervert. You can also use the word more casually. If somebody shows some sexual interest in you, you can call them hentai. If somebody is staring at the woman's breasts, you can call them hentai. And if you want to use it as an adjective, you have hentai teki, which is a na adjective. So you can say something like hentai teki na anime, a perverted anime. But if you say hentai teki na anime, it doesn't necessarily mean hentai. For example, you can call shimoneta hentai teki na anime, but shimoneta isn't hentai. So you have to pay attention to the nuances, because then you will end up talking about completely different things. If you want to communicate with Japanese people, you have to use these words the Japanese way, otherwise there will be some misunderstandings. So if you want to learn Japanese with me, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak. So click the link in the description and subscribe. 僕と契約して日本語を勉強してほしいんだ。 But hentai isn't that different from the English word pervert, which most people kind of are, unless they are like me, who is a completely pure person, because my heart is as pure as romantic anime. But seriously, why is anime romance so pure? I watched Kimi ni Todoke and it took them like 6 episodes just to understand that they are into each other. And I loved every minute of it. Great anime, totally recommend. But I think you can understand why Japanese people are often confused by the way English speakers use the word hentai. Because it's as though Japanese people use the word pervert for pornographic anime and manga. Confusing, right? I remember that when I was in high school, I was talking to some American guys and they asked me about hentai. Back then, I didn't speak as much English and I had no idea what they were talking about. Many years later, when I finally learned what hentai means in English, I was like, oh, that was what they were talking about. Now everything makes sense. But the interesting thing is, these American guys in question weren't like huge anime fans. They had watched Dragon Ball or Pokemon, but probably not much else. Which makes me think that hentai is fairly popular in the United States. You don't have to be an anime fan to enjoy it. It's like English speakers were into hentai so much that they had to borrow a Japanese word for that specific genre. But then, you might be wondering, isn't hentai popular in Japan? Well, that was actually the theme of the video I just quoted, but from what I observed and what I heard from my friends, it's more like a niche genre of pornography. Some people are into it, but other people are not. It's kind of separated from mainstream, how do you say, live action pornography? It's kind of weird to say live action pornography because it sounds like it's a live action version of hentai or something. I don't know how to call regular porn. But looking back, I've come across hentai in many occasions in the past. One of my first memories of being exposed to hentai was in middle school. I went on a bike trip with my middle school friends. We were a bunch of teenage boys and one of my friends was showing off a hentai magazine that he had secured somewhere. I was of course curious about it, but I didn't have the time to take a look at it carefully because the main thing was the bike trip, not the cultural education, so to speak. But the interesting thing again is the guy who had the hentai magazine wasn't really your typical nerdy otaku type. He was actually kind of a bad guy and he was fairly popular with girls. So I guess it's a recurring theme. People who are into hentai aren't necessarily nerdy otaku kinds of people. Also, when I was in middle school, I remember seeing some magazines that contain manga nudity at the bookshop. I didn't know what it was exactly, but being a horny teenager, I would sometimes take a peek at the bookshop. Now that I think about it, it was probably a type of review magazines of visual novels that have some hentai in it. Or maybe these were actually hentai games. I felt like I was doing something illegal, which I kind of was because I wasn't old enough to consume these adult materials. I also remember seeing some doujinshi. I would sometimes go to Akihabara to buy some computer parts because back then, Akihabara was more known for computer parts and some electronic stuff, and not for anime. But there were already some anime shops, and I would explore the area, and that's when I came across some doujinshi shops. And you could see the first few pages of each doujinshi. I didn't buy anything because they were quite expensive. Actually, forget about it. It was because I was very pure, which I still am. And fast forward to university, I remember talking about porn with other students, and one of the guys apparently preferred hentai, and I thought, that's a bit unusual. So these were my early memories associated with hentai. It wasn't something I would come across every day, but it wasn't that unusual either. Sometimes it was just there. And maybe it's kind of the same in other countries. It's not the most mainstream genre, but there are plenty of people who are into it, and there are also people who consume it occasionally, which basically is what you get from my interview video. I've come across these maps of the most searched pornographic terms in the United States, and the 2017 results were pretty interesting. The most searched pornographic term in Alaska was hentai. That's pretty interesting. If you're from Alaska, please let me know why you think that is. There's another thing I noticed about online porn. I have an impression that in Japan, live action porn and hentai are pretty separate. So if you are just looking for regular porn, hentai won't randomly show up, which isn't necessarily the case with Western porn websites because I think these things are more mixed there. You can be watching regular porn, I guess, and suddenly the website starts recommending hentai for you. That's less likely to happen in Japan. I think in Japan you have to go out of your way to search for hentai if that's what you're into. It's actually interesting considering the fact that Japan is the country that produces so much hentai. Maybe next time when I come across a Japanese person who is into hentai, I should ask them where they watch it. For anthropological research purposes only, of course. But if you speak Japanese, you won't have to wait for me to ask other Japanese people. You can start your own research right away. So if you want to learn Japanese with me, I can teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak, which can be different from the kind of Japanese that textbooks teach you because it can be unnatural and old-fashioned. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta. Alright, see you guys soon. Ciao ciao!